Hello, everyone. We have an incredible guest today. Joseph Enochs is the Chief AI Officer and has recently written a book for O'Reilly on visual AI. And he's an incredibly creative person. So, Joseph, tell us a little bit about yourself and why video and photos are just a passion of yours.
It's interesting. I've always been interested in art, even since I was a little kid. I painted and drew hundreds and hundreds of paintings growing up, and it's always just been a drive of my life, just creativity in music and in art. And like for me, when I look back at like my journey to where I've become today, and getting into sort of applied machine learning and AI as part of my career, I think there's a bit of creativity that is in everything, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, is to hopefully to get technical people and creative people together, because I think right now in this age that we're in, that your dreams that you have and being creative to have those dreams, and the technology, like no other time in the world can we make those things, bridge those things closer to making our dreams sort of come true, and having the technology to assist us to do so.
It is so true. And I'm a creative person too. I love to paint. I'm horrible at drawing. And one of the things that I would love to draw one day is a bird. And I think you have a picture of a bird on the book that you're publishing as well.
Absolutely.
Could you
Um,
draw it? I know I couldn't, right? So are you saying that now with AI, I could actually take a stab at it? And how would that work?
I did not draw it. The wonderful folks at O'Reilly drew it, and I think it's beautiful, and I love it. And I hope your audience will check out the book, and check out the cover, the image that we're talking about. It is fantastic. But what I would say is that the interactivity with the technology that's coming is going to get closer and closer and closer to what I would liken to a pencil or a paintbrush, and that vision that you have in your mind, right, can be transformed into the screen that you're on. And the beauty of it is that it won't just be you drawing and it having no necessary context of what you're trying to create. You can say audio just like this. I really like this bird. You could even say, I really like Joseph's lorikeet. I want to draw something like that. And then as you're drawing, I think this is how the beak should look. I think this is the color of how it should look. As you're interacting with it, that's the future of how this technology is going to be. So I'm super excited that the agency of creative people is not going to be taken away from them. And this technology will move closer and closer and closer to the point where it's just like a pencil or a paintbrush, something that can be pixel perfect for you as a creator.
So take me through the book a little bit and how you actually take the artist or the creative through this process. Because a lot of times, we don't have the money. Some of the models are super expensive, and you really offer incredible tools as you progress through the chapters.
That part, thank you, Vicky, for saying that, because that part of accessibility is really one of the motivations of why I wrote the book. Stories deserve to be told. They deserve to be told from all angles, and people should be able to have that freedom to share their stories, and whether that's visual and audio, they should be able to do so. And so the book really is there to really demystify and enable those things. So as you look at chapter one, at the very beginning of the book, the first 5 minutes, we introduce you to a very accessible model called Cog Video, which has 2 billion and 5 billion parameters, right? It's small enough so that you can run it pretty much on your local computer, or you can use free resources like Google Colab to create your first video. Now, again, these are more smaller models, so the outputs are going to be, they're not going to be Martin Scorsese or something like that, but it's going to show you and give you some intuition on how to use prompting skills, on how to really make these machines sort of dream. So you'll start with that. As you look a little bit further down in that initial chapter, it starts talking about like prompt coherence, and it starts talking about like the number of iterations, some technical components that you can do to really speak the language of the vision language models, to really understand how these models were trained. So chapter one, right out of the gate, we're starting the beginning of the hero's journey, if you will. And then when we move into chapter two, we do step back because there's been a lot of talk about protecting and preserving people's creativity when they create it. So chapter two, we do talk a lot about the provenance of the data that's gone into these models. How, if you wanted to create a model from scratch with your own information and provenance, how that works, and sort of some ethical constraints to think about while you're building your own art or creativity or using some of these models. So we really take that step back. Then when we go into chapter three, we really start demystifying every component of vision language models, right? You see all the diffusion transformers, you see variational autoencoders. We decompose all those components. And then through chapters 4, 5, and 6, you actually learn how these models are built. Every component, you can build it from scratch, so to speak, right? Then when you get to 5 and 6, you move into fine tuning these models to really make it look like exactly like you wanted it to do, to make it look like that lorikeet or your own version of it, so that it can produce that every time. And you can call it Vicky's lorikeet, and then it will produce your images and video just exactly like how you want it. Then, when we go into the later chapters, we start adding in vision language models, which is where we really begin to have that interactivity. Because when I create an image, we want the AI to be able to see. And so those vision language models can see the images, can judge the images, and can basically see what you have and describe what it is. And that starts beginning that interactivity between you and this technology, right? When we move into chapter 7, we introduce a tool called LTX from LTX, the group, the company Lightrix. Chapter 7 really breaks down some of their models. But one of the interesting things that they added is audio. So you can now have not just the video like silent films, right? You can have video and audio with text and people speaking and some sound effects, if you will, that they're creating. So that moves into chapter 7. And then chapter 8, we actually talk about, like, hey, is it the model or is it all of the things around these models? So we take a look at some products. One of the ones that a lot of people use is called Comfy UI, which is a very accessible tool. So we decompose Comfy UI and the components inside of it so you can see what it's doing and see how you could potentially modify it for your usage. We also look at another tool called Invoke AI, which was acquired by Adobe, and then LTX Studio is an open source project from LTX, the model maker, and that one we decompose as well to see how it was made. And if you want to create a product that builds these models, we give you the tools to really understand some primitives and rubric on how to rate these primitives of tools that you could build in the industry if you chose.
How would you choose a tool, for example? Do you have a preference? Is there an evaluation criteria that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think it really depends on your outcome. There are a lot of tools that are out there for you. You can just go on OpenAI and create an image, some of these things, and you can look at the tools that you want. I think for me, it's really what the outcome is, right? If your outcome is just to have fun, go look at our notebooks from the book, and you can click and open and create some videos. If you want to do something that's more professional, there are some more professional grade tools that are out there. I think Comfy UI is always one that I recommend people at least take a look at. It is very accessible. There's a lot of documentation out there. You can run it locally. You can run it for very low cost. It's something that is very easy to modify. And again, basically you can kind of click and drag what somebody else has done, because inside of it has the parameters on what you need for to run Comfy UI. You can drop it on your computer and recreate it, and then make adjustments to the prompts and things of that nature. So I would start with something like that and then progress. There's a lot of progression of tools depending on what your outcome is.
I really like that suggestion because you're almost starting with the template. If I were to try to paint the bird that you have on the cover of your book, I probably wouldn't start just with the beak. I would try to get the template of the bird first and then modify it using prompts. You talked a little bit about prompt coherence, and what does that mean?
Yeah, so these models, when they're trained on specific keywords, right? Everyone's heard of like large language models and things of that nature. So the training process, and we go into this in the book, is where you have, like, let's say, an image of a bird, and the text is like This is a bird. And then there's a bird flying, right? This is a bird flying, right? This is a lorikeet flying, right? So the models are trained on sort of keywords, and some of like the vision models are trained on nomenclature from the video industry: zoom in, zoom out, pan, right? There, those sort of terms are trained and baked into the models themselves. So it's very important that to really understand these keywords and key terms as you're prompting. Now, a lot of the models have these translators on them now, so that they take your words and translate them into words that the model can understand. But it's still important to really understand that you're trying to put your words right in the context of what the model can understand, so that it can provide that output for you. And in fact, like one of the things that I always talk about is that we're making machines dream, right? We're putting our inputs into them, and the outputs that they get are the dreams that we're creating, or they're creating with our guidance. If you think of a like a dream catcher, I'm sure you've heard of like a green dream catcher. It was meant to catch bad dreams, but in this scenario, it's like you're putting words in, and then your dreams are coming out, and you're making the machines dream.
How incredible. Have you yourself, is there a recent project you've worked on? You're such a creative person. Is there something you've built that you'd like to share?
I mean, I'm working on making these things at enterprise scale. And what do I mean by that? So, in every industry, not just the media and entertainment industry, but in every industry, vision is going to be important, right? Manufacturing, what's coming up in the future of physical AI. Every one of these modalities, including vision, are going to be built into these models. And so, for me, there's a foundational layer that's very important for these models that sit on top of that. So I've been focusing a lot of my time on building these foundations, what we kind of call the foundation of the skyscraper, if you will. If you look at media and entertainment, if you look at like how they create archives, or how they do a color correction, or how they do these various components, right? What you see on the screen, there are many, 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 many various steps, right? And many tools that they have a lot of friction in. So what I'm doing a lot of is really deconstructing those things end to end to make it so that creative people can really stay in their zone for longer periods of time, so that they're not worried about file formats and switching from this tool to that tool, like reducing that friction. In addition to taking existing content and creating libraries of that content so that it can be in the language of the technology, right? So if you have a piece of art or a movie that you've created, we want to be able to create all the dynamics of that so that you can reimagine that in a different format. So I'm working on projects like that. I can't get into a lot of details for it, but it's really meant to, again, reduce the friction and make it so that creative people, when they're in, let's say they're on a project, maybe before they could only do a small piece of some creative output. I hope for the day when the teams of these studios can each do a screening of their own. And I hope that these tools that are coming out can make it accessible. So when you have a screening day, that there's multiple people in the office who have, with creative direction and been given some agency to do so, can screen their interpretation of that, right? I really hope for that day, and I think the tools that we're making are going to reduce the friction so that we can do that.
So screening day means something to you. I'm not as familiar with the industry. What happens usually, like right now during screening day?
Right? You've heard of like the director's cut and things of that nature, right? That screening is the personification of all that work that has gone into that production workflow, right? That's the directors and the head of art and all of the army of people that go into creating these things, right? When you're doing a screening, that's kind of like the end state, right, of what you want people to see and give feedback on. And they do that daily, right? They call those dailies, right? All that energy and effort that you've put into something, and showing it off and showcasing it to the other teams.
I really love that because you can have multiple iterations during that daily screening, right? I mean, you can create so many more versions using AI than maybe you would be able to with just, do one in the past.
Imagine that. Imagine that right now you have a film that you've created, right? Something that we created, right? and then it's Valentine's Day. You want a Valentine's kind of version of it, right? You can reimagine the same sort of scenes that you've created in a Valentine's version, in a Halloween version, right? You have the ability to reimagine it in different things. So you can take that same story and tell it three or four or five different ways, right? And put some modernization on it, right? Depending on who the audience is for.
I really love that. I just finished watching The Odyssey in the movie theaters. And, that movie probably was done so many different times over. And every time it picks up on different versions of that story, it's a little different. Um, this allows, taking a classical story and really reimagining it many types of contexts, right? And exploring that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things me and one of my collaborators are working on is a film that's Night of the Living Dead that is like kind of like an open source film, but being able to reimagine that in different contexts, right? You can take those sort of old works and reimagine them, and even if you go back to like what you mentioned, like Romeo and Juliet, or the famous historical literature and stories that have been told, those stories, the core of them remain the same, but they've just been reimagined in so many different ways, right? Because the power of that story. And I think there's just so many stories that are out there from just people around the globe. We know those stories because we've seen them, but I think there's other stories from around the world that have a right to be shown. And I'm really excited about the fact that they can be reimagined and shared with people globally.
I really it just opens up a whole new, opportunity, right? Because there's stories that every culture grows up with, and you can tell they have similar context, but are told a little differently. So you can really reimagine the same movie in different ways based on those cultural influences of how that story was told.
I think it's super important, right? Because there's just important life lessons. There's important stories, right? I really think that accessibility for creative people was one of the main components of why I wanted to share this book. I'm the father of like three creative kids, and in this world of AI, like my kids are very skeptical about this, and I think many people are. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring these tools to bear to really make it so that people could demystify this for them, so that they could see that, and that creative people could go really understand this and not be too worried about it, but embrace it so that they could actually do more with their creative journey, and really again open things up to stories that should be told, that people want to be able to hear.
I love that mission. I wanted to ask you about the world models and manufacturing use cases in context. As we get that vision and context and this 4D environment, what does that look like in the future? What are we going towards?
We are going towards physical AI, and I mean that's the direction that this is foreshadowing for. So one of the reasons why I started with video is because you had the large language models, and then we have vision language models, and then we have video generation models, and then to your point, we have more of the open world models, which are more of these immersive. It's like the next step of immersive technology. So there will be a lot more immersive experiences for us to have, but if you think about physical AI and you think about embodied AI and you think about what's going to be happening with, when I say physical world, you can think of robotics as one of them, but you can also think about chemistry and physics and manifestation of this in the real world. That's going to require all of these various modalities. Seeing is definitely one of them. Hearing is one of them, but all those other physical attributes in the world, those are what we're driving towards, right? So when you look at the future of like a world model, Fei Li just did a recent interview. You guys, if you don't know Fei Li, you should really check
Yes, sir.
her out. She's amazing. Her organization that she created, in addition to Jan LeCun, right, who left Meta, they're really focused on world models. But if you look at her recent interview, she talks about that that the physical world needs to have these immersing things for training, right? We have a lot of language, we have the internet, we have everything so that we can pull years and years of data. But what we don't have is a lot of physical world training data. So the beauty of a world model is that it can create a world simulation from an image. And take that image and turn that into a 3D Gaussian version of that, and then transform that 3D Gaussian version into a full scene box, an immersive scene box. And then that scene box becomes interactive. That looks just like a video game, right? So, in that type of scenario, you can imagine from the mind's eye of an agent or a robot, you can put them in these various scenarios, and that's going to make it so that this physical AI that's coming, you can have safe environments for these AI agents or robots to learn in.
Mm, incredible, right? And I almost thought about, the five senses. We're talking about vision, but a lot of even of art, it's like texture. So I think as we go into this new world where we can experience things, we're almost going to use other senses, right, to help contribute to the full picture.
I mean, I'm so excited about how the interactive experiences are going to change. To your point, there is, the tactile components. There's something about being in. I love live music. I go to live music with my family and stuff like that. You're never going to replace like just being there, live, seeing it. But there's things that they can do in those interactive experiences, and there's things that they can do for people who can't experience the live music to really give them some, interactivity in that. So I think to your point, this these elements that you're seeing, they're all going to be placed into these models, and it's gonna create some unique things in the future. I'm actually very optimistic about what the future looks like with the technology.
I think my son was playing a video game and they actually had a concert within the video game. And I was looking at that video, the quality of the visuals was just, like, mind-blowing, and then you have this beautiful music, and there's, like, all these characters that are part of the game are literally, like, sitting around and, and listening to music, and obviously he's part of that experience, but what you're talking about is expanding that even further where you're totally engrossed in that kind of.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like, last week in LA, they had, SIGGRAPH, which is it's a very technical show. There's a lot of people who are animators, 2D, 3D, a lot of organizations there, from media and film industry, in addition to interactivity with the technology, right? And that interactivity is going to become more and more and more immersive over time. It's gonna be very interesting to see the things that are coming out.
It is super, super interesting, and that's why everyone has to read your book because
Thank
you're
you.
gonna set the foundation for them becoming a part of this. They no longer have to be the passive participants. They can actively take part in this new creation process.
Well, that's what I hope for. I hope that this book empowers people to be able to do that. When something really strikes a nerve and really has something passionate about it that people have, right? Those things transcend time, and I think I'm really hoping that that this allows and enables people from all walks of life to be able to tell those stories, and really enables them to do so. And that's one of the reasons why I invested so much time in writing the book. And I'm very thankful for the O'Reilly folks for supporting me, and yourself, Vicky, for inviting me to interact with you and your audience.
Well, you've been an amazing guest, Joseph. Thank you for being part of Chat About AI podcast. I really hope that people reach out to you and connect with you.
Yeah, please hit me up on LinkedIn, and check out the book. Again, this is like the first week of release, and we're rolling out the notebooks and things of that nature in GitHub. Give us feedback. We'll continue to improve on those things. But yeah, hit me on LinkedIn, and yeah, give us some feedback on the book. Thank you guys so very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this, Joseph. Have a wonderful day.
My pleasure. You too. Take care, Vicky.
Thanks.